All right, today we're going to deal with transport in and out of the cell. This is the way that cells survive. They have to have nutrients, they have to have minerals, they have to have different elements so they can put together proteins, so they can have everything they need to do their processes, and then they have to get rid of wastes. Every process, every metabolic, which means process that requires energy or has work around the cell, it requires the getting rid of wastes. Those processes make wastes, and sometimes you know of them, like carbon dioxide for cell respiration. We breathe out carbon dioxide, but we breathe that out because our cells have gotten rid of it and put it in our bloodstream, and then it's been carried to our lungs, and our lungs expel it. That is a metabolic waste product, and so we got to get rid of stuff too. And there's many more things besides carbon dioxide. So cell transport is very important. Getting things in and getting things out is the way life is able to be sustained. And so first of all, whenever we talk about this, you have to remember the cell membrane. And we know that the cell membrane is what surrounds a cell. And so the cell membrane would be just around the edges of the cell. You should have read about it already. It is, it's in all cells. All cells have a membrane. And so a cell membrane, as you probably are well aware, is made up of little phospholipids. So you have a phosphate head, a head that's made out of phosphate. So, whoops. And then you have a tail that's made out of a lipid. Okay. And then it's a double layer. So there's two layers of it. And so this is just obviously one tiny segment. Okay. And so all together we call that a phospholipid. Probably be helpful if you could actually see it. And so a phospholipid is what the membrane is made out of. So this is like a zoomed in picture of like the edge right here. The membrane. So it'd be like these are all the little heads that make that up. Oh, probably can't see that because it's blue. These are all the little heads that make up can't see that either. Yeah, right there, heads. Okay. And then the tails are in the middle. And so this is like, I've taken that and I zoomed it in, and this is big there. And so it goes all the way around the cell. And not just, this is just 2D, but it's like a ball. It like goes all the way around the top area of the cell, like a big ball of a cell. Here, I'll do it up here. Like a big ball of a cell. And so all of that is phospholipid all around. Now, you're going to find out that cells aren't usually in a ball shape. It's not a very efficient way to get nutrients and things to the middle, but that's where the cell membrane is right around the edge. And so our cell membrane here has to allow things in and out. And so today we're going to be talking about that. So when we talk about transport, we're talking about things getting in to the cell and things getting out of the cell to get rid of. And so obviously things just can't run through the cell membrane. Just anything that wants in can, get in, or anything, everything that the cell has on the inside is just squirting out into the extracellular fluid. That's not the case. So there's things that can go in and things that can go out, and the cell has ways of regulating it. So you can think of the cell membrane as kind of like a security system, like things that it allows things in and it kicks things out, and it's a very regulated system. Okay. But first we have to understand concentration. So concentration is something that is very, very important when we talk about cell membrane and cell transport. Something that is like highly concentrated means that there's a lot of stuff together, like a big crowd of people. I don't know if you've ever been to like the fair or like a big city where you could barely walk because there's so many people. It's just a high concentration of people, and they were just everywhere. Or it could just be like, I don't know, in our cell, it's just like a higher concentration of like sugar. It's like higher concentrated. And then lower concentration would be like, if you just like taking a walk outside by yourself, maybe with your dog, but there's nobody around. It's so easy to move. There's lots of space. So the natural tendency of nature in general is to go from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration, to go where it's crowded into some area where there's space. That's a natural tendency of molecules. And we call that diffusion. Okay? The movement of molecules from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. Okay, so area of high concentration, lots of dots, to an area of low concentration, less dots. the dots are going to move that way. Think of it as like, I don't know, you know this whenever something smells, like you spray perfume in the corner of a room and it'll spread out until eventually everybody in the whole room could smell it if you sprayed enough. Or I always say, like, you know, if ever someone like farts in church or something and it's like people start to be like, where's that coming from? Pretty soon the next person's like, oh, and the next person's like, oh, it stinks. You know, things like that. That's diffusion. That's just diffusion of gas molecules. It's from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. It doesn't require energy. Like, there's no energy required. Molecules are bumping into each other, and as they bump into each other, they sort of spread out. And no energy is required for that to happen. So diffusion, no energy. We call that passive. Passive means, I'm going to write it down here. Okay. Passive means that you can just do whatever it is with no energy requirement. Okay. No energy. Okay. So, how the cell membrane deals with this is basically, most things now there are some things that can diffuse right through. Particles that don't have charge. So they don't have like a plus or minus charge, really small particles. Some of those things can pass right through the cell membrane, like no big deal. You know, they don't have to have any sort of thing. There's very few, like water can't even do this. Well, water can wiggle through after a while, but it's not easy for it. Water has a channel. So passive transport typically in the cell. So imagine this goes all the way around and all the way around the circle and up and around and everywhere. Okay. All around the cell. They will have a channel. Okay. So there's a little channel for whatever it needs. And water could be one of them, but let's not use water because it has a very special term. So this is a channel. Okay. It's just, and basically it's like a transport protein. And what that does is it allows things to diffuse through the cell, and it's specific. Okay. So it's protein and it's specific. So only certain, whatever it's for, that's what can pass into the cell, or it could pass out of the cell. Okay. And that's how things diffuse in and out of the cell. There's very specific proteins for specific things. Now, the only thing it can do is go with its concentration gradient. So since this is a passive type of transport, no energy required, then it has to move with the concentration gradient. So when I say that, I mean it has to move from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. So it's moving with the concentration gradient. Okay. In fact, I'm going to erase that and write it because that's an important term. You should write it too. This is concentration with a period at the end. I abbreviated it. With the I could probably fit on there. With the concentration gradient, okay? Meaning from high to low concentration. Lots of stuff to little stuff. I think about it like, I've been on a subway before. I don't know if you have. We don't have subways here too much. Maybe you've been like maybe a school bus or something, and it's really crowded on the subway car or on the bus. It's really crowded, and you're kind of just like, oh, there's so many people around. Can't wait for it to get. And then when you get to the subway station, all the people just whoosh off from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration of people. There's not that many out there, and voila, it's really easy. It doesn't require a lot of energy. It's good. It's like a passive transport, like off you go. Okay. That's kind of what I think about with this. So it's almost like this little door to the little subway and whoosh, out you go. But you have to have a door. You can't just go through the wall, like obviously. Okay. So you have to go through the door. And once you go through the door, but it's an area of high concentration, area low. And then after the subway car's cleared off, then, oh gosh, then there's more people on the platform than there are in the subway car. And they just move right on very easily. And they're like, yeah, yippee skippy. And that's like when it's at a normal time. We'll talk about when it's like at rush hour in a minute, because that's a different type of transport. So this type of transport using a protein channel like this, we call this for the cell facilitated, if I can spell, diffusion. Okay, so this type of transport is called facilitated diffusion. Facilitate, if you facilitate something, it means you help it along. So if you ever have like conflict between people, or you have two businesses that are trying to do a deal, you can have a facilitator. And a facilitator is somebody who actually helps to work the deal or helps to, resolve the conflict. So a facilitated diffusion is just diffusion that's helped by this channel. It's pretty simple. Okay. So facilitated diffusion is one type of passive transport. Okay. So that's kind of cool. So then I said water was different because water is special. So water is special. Water has a special protein channel for it, just for it. Now, water is kind of special because it's so important. Like we have to have water and we have to have it all the time. But water it has to move with its concentration gradient. Like water doesn't get any special privileges like going against the grain or against the concentration gradient. But water moves through, water moves through a special protein called aquaporin. Aqua means water. And then you can kind of imagine that porin talks about pores, like a hole. So aquaporin is a water channel. So it's a water channel protein. Okay. And so we call this movement of water, diffusion of water from an area of high water concentration to an area of low water concentration, we call that osmosis. Okay. That's basically the diffusion of water. Okay. So osmosis is the diffusion of water across the membrane. And so that is, that's still just passive transport. So passive, no energy required. So it's still one of our passive transports. So we have diffusion that doesn't really have a membrane involved. It doesn't have to. It's just the definition that just means it's movement of molecules from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. And then we have facilitated diffusion. That's the movement of molecules from an area of high to low concentration through a channel protein. And then we have osmosis, which is the diffusion of water through a membrane, okay? Now, we call the membrane here a semi-permeable membrane. Semi meaning sort of, permeable meaning able to move through. And so it's sort of permeable. Some things can pass through and some things can't, okay? So if it has a channel for it, it can pass through. And if it doesn't have a channel for it and it doesn't need it for some other reason and have some other major way to get it in, then it doesn't let it in, okay? So that's basically passive transport, no energy required transport. Make sure you have that written down. Okay, so, but what if it needs something and it's against the concentration gradient? So what if it's like, I'm just going to shorthand the membrane now. All those little phospholipids are driving me crazy. So here's my cell membrane, okay? And say that there's something that is inside the cell that has to be out. Like you have to get it out. And so here you've got whatever it is. There's a lot of it. But it's like, this is bad, this is toxic, or it's just, some metabolic waste, something the cell made. But like it's got, sorry, lost my train of thought. Actually, I just drew my picture wrong. It's got more on the outside than it has on the inside. Whatever it is, okay? But it's got to get it out, because this is something that has to be removed from the cell, okay? Well, we have things that are called pumps, and in protein pumps. So they are a protein still, and they usually have some fancier shapes, and they have a docking point right here or right here, depending on, sometimes it's going in, sometimes it's going out. And so what this is going to happen now is you're going to have energy, and our cellular energy is called ATP, adenosine triphosphate, but all my students remember it as all the power. So this is the energy for the cell. Okay. And when that locks onto the pump will force these little guys out. Notice it is against the concentration gradient. Okay. Uses energy, protein, pumps it out. We call this active transport. Active transport. Movement across the membrane that requires energy. It goes against the gradient. You see that? Oof. Sorry. Okay. Goes against the gradient. So it is moving like against nature, moving from an area of low concentration to an area of high concentration. Okay. So that's active transport. And we use pumps. That's a pump. Okay. So active transport is that. Passive transport doesn't require energy. It's moving with the concentration gradient. It's going with the flow. Okay. All right. Cool. One last active transport we're going to talk about. And that is the weird one. What if you need really big items in? Okay. What if you have a big chunk of something and the cell needs it? And that's not going to fit through that pump, or anything. That's too little. So what happens then? Something really weird. What happens is when this touches the membrane or comes to the membrane, the cell is signaled that it should take it in. Then it kind of engulfs in here. So basically it moves into this membrane. The membrane then will fold around it. I'm going to do my best here. It'd be better if I had a string. The membrane will fold around it like this. See if I can draw the membrane folded around it. So it'll nestle into there. The membrane will pinch off right here. Okay, and since the membrane is able to self-seal, what it'll end up doing is creating a little vesicle with that in it. I'm going to just color it so that you can see the difference between. Okay, so it'll put it in this vesicle so that it can take it in. So then it'll be in a vesicle because stuff just isn't allowed to just travel around the cell without a membrane around it. And so that's a chunk of the cell membrane that's wrapped around there that was folded in off of the membrane. So we call this endocytosis. Endo meaning inside, cyto referring to cell. Inside the cell. Okay. So it got that inside the cell. This is a active transport because it requires a lot of energy to fold the membrane like that. Okay. What do you think exocytosis is? Yeah. Just turn the arrows around and squirt that out. Same thing. Only in that instance, the vesicle would actually fuse with the membrane and then become a part of the membrane. And so with vesicles coming in and vesicles going out, you end up with about the same amount of membrane. So you don't have to worry about losing membrane. Okay. So today you should have learned passive transport and active transport and reviewed your cell membrane. Your cell membrane is very fluid. It moves a lot. Like your little phospholipids, they can move around each other. Like say these are the little heads here and my markers, and these are the little tails. And your phospholipids, they can move around each other. Here's another one. They can like that. They can move the protein channel. So say this weird thing, weird adapter thing is my protein channel. So it's in there, right? Well, maybe the protein channel needs to be over here. So the little phospholipids can just sort of yippy skippy it over there so that now it's in a different spot. Fluid, able to move. Okay. It's fluid. Nothing is holding still. Okay. It can expand. It can compress. It's got cholesterol in there that's holding it together so it doesn't just fall apart when it expands and compresses. But it's very fluid. Okay. And it can self-repair. So falls out, it'll just close up the gap. We lost one. Okay. So it's pretty cool. All right. I hope that's helps you. Have a good day, and I'll see you soon.